Well, I think a lot of people would think that the excavations were the big things that stood out, and they're important. But for me, the thing that has been sort of a game changer was the use of the app. The fact that the technology, which was relatively new for what SCAPE and SCHARP were trying to do when it started, that technologies worked and people have been able to use it and it's proved effective, and people have learned a lot from that exercise.
Well, I participated in the conference in Glasgow. Well, the two conferences, weren't there, really? Yes. And they were really just wonderful occasions because they were full of enthusiasm and full of younger people and older people all enjoying being together and exchanging information about the situation in their part of Scotland, where they had done work on the coastal erosion and finding the archaeology. So they were just tremendous exchanges of ideas and enthusiasm, and I enjoyed them very much.
I think the main one is working up in Orkney with the local group up on Sandy, where we moved a series of structures from the beach and reassembled them at the Heritage Centre. That was a great fun project, and we had everybody from the community working together, transporting things across the island, plus we had the excavation, and the work is ongoing as well.
I think the Ask an Expert project was invaluable because we always find that whenever we go and speak to community groups, they always tell us how much they value the accessibility of experts in our field, and the fact that they could go along and ask any question they wanted of people who'd stood up and said, well, this is what I'm a specialist in, come and ask me about this, come and find out about this, and just expose them to the different techniques that are available and how to go about finding about them. And again, what I found with the conferences is there's a buzz to them, there's an energy and a buzz, which I think, and you can see very, very clearly what people are getting out of this.
I think getting to know Scotland properly. So SCHARP projects and meeting with volunteers have taken us all around the coast of Scotland, and we've gone to some amazing places, which brings me to my second point, which is just the sheer number of people that we've met who we've really enjoyed meeting and we've learned a lot from and have been very, very motivating. We've enjoyed that aspect particularly.
What's stood out most strongly for me personally is just travelling all over Scotland, all around the coast, and just exploring the various beautiful coastal areas of Scotland, walking along beaches and exploring brilliant heritage sites with local people.
The impact of SCHARP on our local area has been particularly noticeable because our records across the Western Isles were very inconsistent. So the SCHARP project has worked with those inconsistent and very different records across the islands to make them much more consistent, to draw them together. And there's also, through the SCAPE Trust, of course, been more coastal erosion surveys done in the Western Isles. So we now have a fantastic, consistent, prioritised database which we can use for future research and which helps set the research agenda for the islands.
A couple of years ago, Scotland's archaeology strategy was launched, and that's all about saying that archaeology is for everyone, and we want to actually maximise the opportunities for people that people have in terms of access to archaeology, understanding, increased understanding, greater engagement. And to my mind, SCHARP embodies so many of the principles of the archaeology strategy that's one of the reasons it's been so interesting to watch and see the developments and see the enthusiasm of all the people that have been able to get engaged.
From the local archaeological site of it, one thing that our unit does is maintain the sites and monuments records specific to Fife. And we really don't have the resource to go and reassess the sites, to maintain an up-to-date record of information relating to them. So SCHARP's work of going around each site and making a quick record, a survey of the site as it is at the moment, contributes massively to the historical record we have of maritime archaeological remains. Well, from the NAS point of view, it's been very useful to be able to get NAS members who are not specifically diving orientated to be involved in the foreshore and coastal aspect of nautical archaeology.
I think a lot of what SCAPE is about is showing people what can be done and giving them toolkits and the expertise to make it happen elsewhere. And that's happened internationally and with some very important UK projects.
I think that the international recognition that the SCHARP project has now as a gold standard of how to handle volunteer involvement and local involvement and how to articulate the different needs and demands of academics and locals and politicians and so on.
From a Scottish perspective, obviously it's wonderful that we've got a project going here that seems to be a world leader.
The main achievements of SCHARP as a whole have been, well, a number of things. Firstly, in terms of our updated information about coastal heritage that is being damaged as a result of erosion, we now have a much better understanding of what sites those are, where they are, and how they're being damaged. And that really is the first time we've had an overview across the whole of Scotland of what, where, how many, and an indication of what to do about it as well. That's really, really important, and that's all based on volunteer data. Secondly, through the shore digs, where we've done excavations or surveys or documentation of particular sites, we've actually found new, interesting, exciting information. So there was a new broch that we recorded in Shetland. In Orkney, a Bronze Age burnt mound, we did an excavation there and we found out there was a Neolithic site underneath. And these are all sites, these are just two examples of sites where if we hadn't have done this project, and more importantly, if volunteers hadn't told us about these sites, because we didn't know about them, we wouldn't have that information. And it's really significant new archaeological information.
I think the other thing SCHARP's achieved is we do now have a network of well-trained local experts who are eyes and ears on the ground and can report to us about changes to heritage sites. We've got a really great network of volunteers all over Scotland who can monitor those high priority sites for us as well.
I think the main outcomes are just seeing the different ways that communities have been engaging with their heritage that's been at risk. It's been a real eye-opener. Working together, we've come up with all sorts of different solutions of ways of recording and interpreting coastal heritage which is at risk. And I think this is one of the outstanding legacies of the project.
The sheer volume of data in the SCHARP has generated a lot of information. A lot of records have been sent in by volunteers. So it has been quite a long process just dealing with the sheer volume of records that have been sent in by volunteers over the course of the past 5 years.
SCHARP looks as though it's been running very, very smoothly, which it has, but there's a huge amount that goes on behind the scenes to make that happen. There's an awful lot of preparation and office work, and I think some of that has been quite challenging, but it's obviously essential because without that, things would start to fall to pieces out in the field, so it has been worthwhile.
The most challenging thing about SCHARP has been the technology side of it. So at the beginning of the project, we developed a website and an app so that volunteers could access information about coastal heritage and submit information back to us. We developed the app over 5 years ago now. So it was sort of really in the early stages of people using apps. So we had a period of probably a good 18 months where we were constantly sort of having glitches and people were struggling with the app particularly, and so we spent a lot of time on that.
I think SCHARP has had a very useful impact. I mean, SCAPE was doing very good work anyway, but it wasn't really that well known amongst the general population. But SCHARP has, of course, had its main function in being in contact with communities. So in that way, it's really broadened understanding and knowledge of what the SCAPE Trust is all about.
So we've really built upon many years of working with volunteers, of working at eroding sites on the coastline, of doing research into coastal heritage in Scotland, of trying to get a handle on the resource and what's going on with it. But SCHARP's enabled us to do a lot more all at the same time, and crucially we've involved hundreds of more people. So it means that people know more about us and we know more about all the network of people out there who are interested in coastal archaeology and who, you know, we're looking forward to working with in the future as well.
Well, SCAPE did a lot of work in thinking about what needed to be done and getting the evidence for that, but SCHARP has actually gone out and done it in a very creative way.
I think the impact on the organisation has been that it's enabled SCAPE really to widen its networks. I think SCHARP really has built on SCAPE's sort of core ethos of working with local volunteers and the local community.
SCHARP has had an amazing impact on the SCAPE Trust. I've been involved in the SCAPE Trust directly and indirectly since the earliest days of its foundation, initially as the regional archaeologist and later as one of the directors. And what the SCHARP project has enabled the Trust to do is actually develop a systematic methodology for dealing with the vast amount of coastal erosion records that we have across Scotland, and for making those records work. So that as a result of the project, those records are now cross-comparable across large areas of Scotland. We've got volunteers who are involved in recording and monitoring sites, and we've been able to prioritise sites for further attention in a way that just wasn't possible before, and it's built up the Trust as well. More people are actively involved with the work of the Trust, more people are employed by the Trust. It's made the whole thing much more sustainable and much more robust. As directors, we're delighted with how it's gone.
SCHARP has been a very important project. It's helped us to look at sites in new ways. It's helped us to travel all around the country to engage with new groups, but also we've been able to talk to people beyond Scotland's borders. We've been all around the world telling people about our project, and there has been a huge amount of interest, so that has been very, very positive.
The impact of SCHARP is that it's actually just enabled, to a certain extent, the resource base to increase, but also the mobilisation of the communities around the coast to get them more engaged with their heritage. And it's that project and the funding for that project that's enabled, I think, much more knowledge about coastal archaeology and about what's happening to our coastlines.
Well, obviously you're going to have to ask the volunteers themselves about that, but I would hope, and from what I've seen, that they've enjoyed being involved in the project, but also learnt new skills, new techniques, and have got a new awareness of the rich diversity of heritage that's all around the Scottish coast.
I think there's been a profound impact on many people. Getting out there, going to the field exercises, or even just going to the events and seeing that you can be part of something like this has obviously inspired people, and you can see that in the way that they've gone out and invested their time in the field and in the post-field work, and also when they're still interested and then taking projects to the next step on their own initiative. I think that's really important for community-based exercises, initiatives like SCHARP, because at the end of the day, it's not a matter of us going in and doing something with communities and then going out again. We need to have a legacy. We need the communities to still want to do it.
Over the last 6 months, we've been doing a lot of evaluations ourselves. So we've asked volunteers what they thought of the project and if they've enjoyed themselves. And overwhelmingly, people have really, really loved being involved because it's interesting, they learn new skills, and it's a good social event.
The team members coming out here on a regular basis and training folk and setting up a system for them to feed information into the project has made a huge difference to the involvement of interested people. UHI students have been involved, members of the public have been involved, and I'm hugely grateful for the experience that it's given them and the structure which has been established, which has allowed us to continue that work into the future.
Well, I've seen at first hand, both actually on site, on the trip I went to on Sunday last year, and also in the conferences that you've done, just the scale of enthusiasm that there is by the local communities, and also the extent to which they value the working with experts in the field that they are with the SCAPE Trust.
I think the impact on individuals has ranged from having a nice time meeting us, maybe learning a little bit about their own local coastal heritage, to people who've been very, very involved. I think there are actually one or two people who really have had a significant change in their lives because of the project, whether that's people who've gone on and actually got jobs because of the experience from volunteering with us, or have actually gone and done some university degrees and things off the back of their involvement with the project. So I think it's varied a lot, but hopefully it's been a good and enjoyable experience for everyone.
Well, as far as I can see, it's just all been positive. They all just seem so enthusiastic and full of praise for the work that SCHARP have done in helping them to do the work around the coast and to record the changes in the coastline. But that's not easy to do if you're on your own or in a small community. So to have the backup from the staff of the SCHARP project, I think it's vital and it's very important, and it's a model for how these projects should go forward in the future.
The only obvious thing we need to do is more of the same, really, I think. It's back to the fact that there's a recognition, obviously, that there's only a limited number of sites that we can actually deal with. So I think we probably collectively as a community need to think more about how we're tackling the issues around our entire coastline.
Advice would be to sort of categorise and assess the sites, prioritise them, and then expend the resources you have on the ones that are important, like the ones that are actively eroding, that are going to be lost. As harsh as it sounds, it doesn't matter if the site is then destroyed by natural processes. We do have a record of it that is there for interpretation and for future study.
I've got to say that the SCHARP project has been hugely successful, and I think everyone's learned a lot from it. It's been fantastic. Couldn't be happier with it.
Well, I think keep doing it. The bottom line is that we need to do as much as we can with communities, with professional groups, before this evidence goes into the sea.
Do you have anything else to add about the project, or anything that you'd like to expand on, really?
I think a big part of the success of the project has been the expertise and the nature of the staff. I think they've been absolutely fantastic. They've thrown themselves into it, heart and soul. They are universally loved by the community groups that they help. And that has been a tremendous uplifting experience for me as a director of SCAPE, as well as for the communities who are inspired by the work.
Thank you. That was a good ending.
That's not me.
I've learned an absolutely enormous amount from working on SCHARP, actually. I think for me the key sort of messages are everything's in terms of preparation. So I think SCHARP's been so successful because it's had a really good project design. SCHARP has done some really quite large scale projects. Some of the big excavations, and they take time not only to actually plan but also to implement, and then in terms of the post-ex as well. So I'd think thinking quite carefully about your about timescales.
I suppose a big one would be to really think about the timescales of projects. We probably underestimated the number of things we would find, actually. In our next project, I will just assume that we're going to find lots more great stuff, and we're going to find new material and create new archives and build in at least a year at the end of the project to deal with all that properly and write it up properly.
SCHARP has been quite a big project, and so it's certainly helped us develop systems for recording, for how we would go about organising big projects. SCHARP has helped us to work with groups all around the country, and I think that we've learnt a huge amount from this interaction that we can take forward. And of course, one of the main things that we've done is we've really got into video. And t-Dogg, let's turn the cameras on you. So, Tanya, you've been recording all of the volunteers. What do you think they've got from it?
Well, I have had the privilege of going around and interviewing a lot of the volunteers for this evaluation film. And I think the number one thing I'm going to take away from what the volunteers may have got from this project is just how much they've enjoyed themselves, how much they've learned, how much they've been able to build on the skills that they already have. And I think I could really see this clearly at the 2016 conference that we had in St Andrews, seeing all of the research coming together, but most importantly, all of these groups from all over Scotland coming together and really creating that community atmosphere based around the SCHARP project. It was really, really impressive.
And how about yourself? What are you going to take away from all this?
So I think other than some pretty brilliant filmmaking skills, the main thing I'm going to take away from this project is just the sheer number of eroding sites around Scotland, and more importantly than that, the network that we've managed to tap into with the SCHARP project, a network of dedicated, keen volunteers who are very, very well trained to going out to look at these sites and to really help us care for our coastal heritage. You're not filming me though, are you?
No, don't worry. We're not going to use this.
Use it.